with this next module, we're going to talk about incident investigation. Obviously, it's something that affects many organizations. There's a lot of different incidents out there that can happen, and there's obviously reasons to implement good investigation processes that I'll discuss as well. Obviously, if we've gotten to this point, we do everything we can to stop something from happening in the first place, but once something does occur, there's got to be some processes in place to evaluate what happened, find a better way to do things to prevent it from happening, and there's also a number of positives that come out of incident investigations that I'll talk about. I wanted to define a couple items related to incident and accident investigations to start. Talk about who performs investigations, who should be involved in that process ideally, why investigations are performed in the first place, like why even stop everything we're doing, why evaluate what happened. We'll touch on that a little bit. We'll talk about when investigations need to be performed, ideally, in terms of from a time standpoint. Talk about some basic fundamentals and steps. Okay, here's ideally our steps that we want to walk through in the investigation process, start to finish. Then we're really going to talk a lot about root cause analysis and some of the forms that you have at your disposal that the organization's developed, both that helps identify root causes through questions to ask and also evaluating certain components as are outlined in your investigation form. So we'll talk about that as well. And then we'll talk a little bit about follow-up processes and the importance of actually following up on items after you've identified causes and identified a root cause to make sure that event does not repeat itself. So that's going to be our agenda for this session. I always like to start with this. I think it kind of puts things in perspective. What I wanted to talk about, and this visual puts it in a pretty good manner, is there's near misses where an incident was definitely not planned and we didn't want it to happen, but we just got away lucky because under a similar circumstance it would have been an injury or an illness or something to that effect. But there are near misses that happen on a regular basis where if the situation was slightly different, it would be an incident and we would be having to report a claim or an injury or property damage or an auto claim or whatever the case may be. So where the opportunity really lies is in identifying those near misses when they happen and investigating those. That's really taking it to the next level and not just responding to incidents when they happen, but saying, hey, this situation was not desired. We did not want this to happen. We basically got very lucky. So we should treat this the same we treat an incident that somebody was actually injured, because under a similar circumstance, that's exactly what would have happened. There would have been an injury of some sorts. So those are the near misses, and then the incidents are really the situations that, again, are not planned or undesired, but did result in a property damage or an injury to an individual. So wanted to identify those things up front, but emphasize the importance of the near miss reporting and investigation and coming up with root causes for those things as well. That's where you really take it to the next level and prevent injuries from happening. And ultimately, investigating an incident is really a basic element to the risk management in general. I mean, if you're not investigating incidents, you're probably not going to make a whole ton of improvement. I mean, that's really the first step and a very fundamental basic element of risk management overall. So when should an investigation be performed? What's your current policy? When do you guys have to perform investigations? After an accident, is there a time frame, a guideline? Within 24 hours? Right, that's pretty quick. I'm sure that you have a lot of things to do and things on your schedule, but you have to address those items. Obviously, as soon as you can investigate the incident, the sooner the better. Because what you have is, if you wait till the end of the shift and you have the ability to do it as soon as possible, you're going to lose some detail and you're going to lose some information. You want to respond as quickly as possible to obviously you want to show some concern, and that you want to make an incident, if it occurs, you want to make it a big deal that it occurs, and you want to show that you're not going to allow it to happen again. But you also, people's perceptions change and their thoughts change the further away you get from an incident. Because once I observe something, I'm a potential witness. Once I go and talk to somebody else, my perception can completely change on what happened, and you may not get the facts as clear as you would have if you got to that individual before they talked to anybody else. And also physical conditions can change. It's just like a crime scene. You know, police don't allow people just to walk through a crime scene. Once they identify where it happened, what do? Rope it off, right? They make sure that not everybody can gain access, and when they do gain access, they can't contaminate or change things, right? So it's the same type of scenario. You want to keep everything the same as much as possible until your investigation is complete. It's important to respond as fast as possible, not only to gather the facts, but to show people that an incident occurred and that it's very important for the company to respond to it. Okay. So who should investigate? Usually the most immediate manager or supervisor is the best person to at least lead an investigation. Obviously, I think there's definitely times where other people should get involved because they have a lot to bring to the table or have some interesting insight into an incident, but that supervisor is most knowledgeable about the individuals involved, the environment, and is a representative of management. So they're usually very vital in that investigation. Who's been involved in an investigation in the past?
Yeah.
A couple?
A few, yeah.
Okay. What was your biggest challenge in responding to the incident and ultimately, investigating it, doing paperwork and all that stuff?
Initially, it's just getting.
Is it a challenge for you all just to get somebody to respond and investigate it in the first place based on being spread out? One thing you may want to consider, and again, it's different for it may be different for you all based on the division and your head count at certain locations, but outside of the immediate supervisor, other options are to, if you have a committee, some type of safety committee in place, to have some type of representation there. Not necessarily that they have to lead it, but to get somebody from a committee engaged in investigating the incident can be very helpful. And if it's serious, and if it's as it gets more serious or beyond what you guys believe you have a knowledge of in terms of prevention methods, you may want to also get other people involved. Your own risk management group, peers, across in another division, or that manage different operations, just to get a different set of eyes or a different opinion could be very helpful in the investigation. Sometimes getting somebody who's not familiar with a specific operation is helpful because they ask basic questions, and it may make you think differently because you're so used to the norm. Sometimes you don't think outside the box a little bit, and sometimes solutions are very simple. If it's a case of like property damage or obviously like an auto accident of some kind, obviously there's other people that you may want to get involved, such as consultants. If there's a property loss, so to speak. I mean, there's things that are just outside of your core competency or what your skills are. So you may want to also think if you get to a point where you're not comfortable, reach out internally to your risk management group and see if there's somebody that can help you. But it doesn't always just have to be that one person and that's it. Think about the other team members and the players that you have that could be helpful. So why do we investigate incidents? I think, would you guys agree, number one is to stop it from happening again, right? If something happens once, you really don't want the same exact scenario to play out again. It's an opportunity. Something bad happened. It's an opportunity to have something good come out of it. So you put a good control in place so you don't have an incident again of whatever magnitude that was. To show concern, we talked a little bit in a different training session, but it shows the employees that it's a big deal, that you're concerned with their safety. If they're involved in an incident and nobody ever asks any questions about it, it may send the message that safety is not all that important. It's just a part of doing business. And that's not I don't believe that's a message you all want to send. So you want to do that to show concern. You obviously want to identify your root cause, and we'll talk about root cause analysis to find what a true root cause is, but you really want to dig down deep, ask yourselves a lot of questions, assess how the process was managed so you can find a way to prevent it from happening. So that's why we do that. You also address liability issues. For example, if you have the same incident happen over and over again and you never investigate and find a way to stop it, you're really opening yourself up to additional liability issues where you could be found negligent, right? That's a big word thrown around in the legal environment, but that basically means you knew there was a hazard that was inherent or that existed, and you did nothing to control it. For example, like there was a case of let's just call it a fast food restaurant, okay, and there was a lawsuit related to hot coffee burning people, okay, and you would think, well, coffee is hot. I can't imagine that company would be held responsible for somebody burning themselves. But if you evaluated their records and you found hundreds upon hundreds of complaints regarding the hot coffee, they didn't do anything to address it, via warning or change in process, therefore their lack of action, they were found negligent because they knew there was a risk and they didn't do anything to change that risk or try to improve condition. So that's just an example. When you know something exists, you have to address it. If you don't, then you knowingly are not addressing an issue. Okay? Expose errors in the way something was performed or a step wasn't followed in a procedure. Identify and eliminate hazards in general. I think what you'll find is we'll talk about some immediate causes, some contributing causes, and the root causes of incidents. You may find a root cause, but you may find a handful of other things that you could have done a little bit differently that you found is just a better way to do it throughout your investigation. Ultimately, investigating incidents and stopping more from happening will also have a benefit to the company in terms of reduced costs of insurance and things of that nature. Correct both unsafe acts and conditions, and really analyze how you're managing safety in that area or that operation. The wrong objectives. Investigating for sake of appearance. That is basically just going through the motions, right? There's this form that exists. I have to do it, so I'm just going to kind of go out there, peek around, and check some boxes and get the form back in. I mean, if you're going to take the time to do it right and go all the way through with it. You don't want to discipline somebody just to set an example, because what you want the exercise to be is you want it to be fact-finding. Think about in your areas if you want to look at ways that you could have done something better to manage the process and not focus so much on that individual. Ultimately, focus on the management system, how you managed, and how you can improve a process to stop the incident from happening, and not just focus on the individual.